Hello friends, my name is Aaron Prosser and I'm the rector here at St. Peter's Anglican Church in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining me for just a few short minutes as we continue our journey through the Gospel of John. I'd like just to look at one thing today. I've been looking back on some of the past videos and realized they were getting a bit longer than I expected them to. So I'd like to look at one short thing in the first 3 verses of the 4th chapter of the Gospel of John. We are saying goodbye to St. John the Baptist. We'll see him again, or certainly hear about him again, but we're now going to look at Jesus. Jesus is coming into his own, as it were, in public ministry, and it begins with the temptation of Jesus. And so I'd like to look at just the first 3 verses of the 4th chapter. You're welcome to read them in your own scriptures if you'd like. You're welcome to pause the video, and I'll include a link as usual, and I'll read them here. It says, "Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry." And let me add my own comment, and rightly so. And it says in the beginning part of verse 3, "And the tempter came." And then it moves on to the 3 temptations, which we'll look at in our several next times. But I'd like to say something just about these 3 verses. And that is, friends, that there is nothing wrong with being tempted. There's nothing wrong with being tempted. So often I meet people who are just tied up in knots, who are so frustrated, who think there is something so deeply wrong with them because they are tempted. They think they should reach a point in their spiritual life, reach a point in their maturity where they're not going to be tempted, or at least that the temptations should move on to something new, not the same old temptations that come to them. But friends, to be in this life is to be tempted. We are not living in heaven yet. And we see that right here in these verses, that Jesus himself was led up by the Spirit, that is, led by God, into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. This was part of God's plan for him. And it says in another part of Scripture that Jesus was tempted in every way, as we are, yet did not sin. And that last part is the only difference we can expect. Now, hopefully, we defeat all sorts of temptations as we grow stronger and as we learn to understand things. But though we are imperfect, Jesus was perfect, yet we both face temptation. And it's not because there is anything wrong with us. In fact, we should expect it. In fact, we should not be surprised by it. In fact, it is often a sign of things going right in one's spiritual life, because then the tempter takes notice of it. Let me read you something from a great English preacher of the 1900s. Speaking of this, he says, "Understand that you have to be tempted. The wilderness, or our day-to-day life here, is not a sphere lying thousands of miles from your course. Your eye is fixed on heaven, and right across, from sea to sea, lies the wilderness, and you cannot escape it. There is no way to sneak into heaven." And I love that last line. There's no way to sneak into heaven. There's no way to bypass the experience that every saint, that every follower of God has had, no matter how wonderful, no matter how powerful. There is no way to experience there is no way to skip the experience of Jesus Christ himself, of experiencing temptation. So rather, when we experience temptation than casting ourselves down and thinking there is something wrong with us, let us instead look to God for strength. Let us instead receive what he sends us, that we might be strengthened. And let us see what he is trying to teach us in the midst of this temptation. Thank you so much for joining me for these few minutes today. In the weeks and months to come, we will look at the individual temptations of Christ and what we might learn through those. But now, I wish you a good day and good health and wonderful weather.